Welcome, everybody. My name is Joe Wickland, Communications Director for the City of Hermantown, and this is our fourth full-blown public information meeting about the Community Recreation Initiative. The first three kind of focused on individual projects and the component projects within it. And this one will be a little bit more broad. We'll cover a little bit of everything today. I'm joined here in City Council by John Mulder, our city administrator in Hermantown, Chad Ronchetti from Krause Anderson, who is a trusted partner in this process in terms of both the referendum and steps that we need to take as a city, as well as the build when we talk about the arena. And then Eric Johnson, our community development director, who has been a huge part of our trails process, our parks master plan, and as well as looking both at the past of those things and an insider looking at the future. I'm going to pop up on our screen today a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation to walk through, because we'll cover, again, all three projects kind of in their entirety, and we can deep dive with some questions that have already been sent into each one. And we'll, of course, cover the sales tax piece as a whole. But there's kind of a starting point. Let's see if I can get this screen started. Just to kind of recenter everybody what we're talking about when we talk about the Community Recreation Initiative. So there are three separate component projects. And you're going to kind of see us reiterate that a couple times today because of some of the information that's floating around out there. But the community projects are the potential addition of a sheet of indoor ice, which will be located next to our current arena. And we'll talk more about that actual location and the flexibility we've built in to support the school. A reimagining of Fichtner Park with a turf baseball field, some reconfiguration, new playground equipment, sports courts, basketball, skate park, and as well as the completion of our trail system, which folks have already had a taste of and a really good experience with, but are kind of sometimes surprised. Eric and I talked about this week that it's far from done, even though we're experiencing it right now, that it's almost 30% complete, 3 miles of 10 miles in the plan complete. And that sales tax and those projects are all entirely decided by our voters, both in early voting that's happening now and November 8th. Three separate projects, three separate questions on the ballot, and each one of them passes separate from each other. The heart of these is something that we've been focused on, both because of community input on our surveys, but also knowledge that our area up north here in St. Louis County does not have high quality health outcomes. And that has helped lead to the creation of the Essential Wellness Center, which we'll talk a little bit about today. That entirely, that sales tax funded project has already been a success and continues to be. And the idea that we need to be able to provide healthy opportunities and recreational opportunities that aren't just combined to that particular building and that stretch out outside of that building. Something we learned both obviously through the pandemic in terms of access, but also in terms of the desire for more and more of our members of our community to have more and more recreation opportunities. So three components and one goal, three different projects with the goal of continued health, continued improved health outcomes in southern St. Louis County and northern St. Louis County. That piece, by the way, is the regional impact that people talk about that allows us to be able to even explore using sales tax. We'll talk about the regional impact of sales tax, but the idea that part of what we'd be doing might be very Hermantown specific with the voters, but also has an impact beyond just our community, even though these three amenities would be right in our town. Some important considerations. Let's talk about some pieces that have floated around in this process. That's been quite a lengthy process to be able to get to this point. So the folks who aren't in the know on the history of the referendum, John, when the discussion about individual projects, even before we started making it official with the legislature, which I'll talk about in a second, is years in the making, isn't it?
Yeah, in fact, I looked at my calendar this afternoon in anticipation of the meeting. I had a meeting in November of 2014. It was my very first meeting in talking about with the Hockey Association about the need for an additional sheet of ice. So that's 8 years that we've been talking about it. In 2017, we started doing some more formalized work where we were actually hiring architects to kind of help us think about what that might look like, what that might the design might be, what might be some options. We did some early discussions with professionals in as early as September of 2017.
And Eric, I know that in your role, I've been here since 2019 in my position when it was created, but you've been, working through Parks Master Plans and kind of working on the, what the Hermantown Proctor Munger Spur, the original kind of name, in making those a reality the entire time you've been here as well, right?
Yeah, that's true. Back in 2014, just like John had said, the city engaged the consultant firm of HKGI, as well as working with the city of Proctor and Duluth to envision basically that Munger Trail Spur that you just referenced. So in that case, there was a visioning document that was the extension all the way from our wellness center and the Hermantown School campus through the city, adjoining Proctor, and then eventually butting into the Munger Trail Spur down in Duluth. How this, looked at a number of different routes, how this could be facilitated. At that point, some potential costs associated with it. Then in 2016, the city made an application to the state of Minnesota through their GMRPTC, which is the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission, that this master plan was then recognized by that commission. In that case, then we could start applying for grants, the potential construction of some of these trail segments.
And so that brings us up to a little bit more when I got involved in 2019 in my role, where we were able to take both some of the ideas that John and Eric had talked about and be able to start attaching potential funding sources to that. The Essential Wellness Center had been a success in terms of going through the long and lengthy process to be able to get that on the ballot, approved, built, and started to make an impact in our community. And it's a slightly different process now that Hermantown and other communities had to go through to be able to get the questions on the ballot and to be able to have the voters voice in on this. That process started in earnest in 2019. And when we went down to the legislature to work on getting that finalized, that's about the same time that the pandemic rolled out, and kind of the process both at the state level and at the city level kind of ground to an appropriate halt. When it picked back up, there was still a lot of momentum around the idea that this was an area that we'd had success utilizing sales tax and success working to improve health outcomes through recreation. And so we reached a point where the legislature had looked at the proposal and said, yes, this is something that your voters should have a chance to decide on based on the regional benefits. And then there was some debate back and forth as the questions you'll see on the screen. There was questions about a special session, which would have added to the project based on both a tax bill, which would have added to each project the cost changes that had occurred since the original proposal in 2019, a bonding bill that would have added specific funding available for the potential arena. Both of those did not happen, and we don't necessarily expect them to happen going forward. There was a strong discussion about 3 separate questions on the ballot versus one. We've always looked at this as one initiative around health in our community, but it worked out where legally and appropriately all 3 questions are separate. That's really important, and we'll get into that a couple times today, that 1, 2, or 3 of these projects can pass. They can pass separate from each other. Each just requires 50% of the vote plus 1. And we will have either 1, 2, or 3 of those projects. The sales tax increase in the community will be 0.5% regardless. The time on the tax will be the difference, because the 3 projects, the arena, Fichtner Park, and the completion of the trail system do, of course, have different price tags. What has come up recently, and I'm going to say this a couple times today, is that it's really important to note that the full amount, the full 19 million, that number that gets used, does not get unlocked if 1 passes. Even in the questions themselves on the ballot, it outlines the exact amounts. So the referendum allows for the following amounts to be allocated for each project: 3.9 million for Fichtner. So if enough folks vote yes on that, that amount is unlocked, and we'll talk about that in a second with Eric. 4.5 million for the completion of the trail system. Again, folks have had some experience on that. It isn't 19 million for the trail if that passes, just 4.5, and 10.84 for the additional sheet of ice. We don't get the full amount unless all 3 pass. And we'll kind of dive into like the year differences and how long that tax runs. And yes, it is a required sunset. A little bit about sales tax. When we talk about it in Hermantown, 1, we only have a 1% sales tax. That is significant on the city level, but the total number actually comes from a variety of different places. The state of Minnesota has a statewide sales tax of 6.875%. And there's also a 0.5% sales tax associated with St. Louis County. So our 1%, the 0.5% from the county and the 6.875% from the state brings us to 8.375 that's charged inside the city limits of Hermantown and on things purchased here. Not all things, but the things that are sales tax eligible. Our neighbors next door, Duluth, recently raised theirs a 0.5% higher to 8.875 with a focus on road improvement. That's part of what helps us feel more comfortable in Hermantown, that if we were to take the step in this and go a 0.5% higher, that there wouldn't be significant behavioral changes in shopping and things that people do, because our largest neighbor actually would have at this moment has a 0.5% higher sales tax. In investigating this further, I worked with the University of Minnesota and we commissioned a study to know, how does sales tax operate in Hermantown? Specifically, our buyers, our businesses, how does that impact our how sales tax comes in and out of Hermantown? And there were two really key details that came out of that. The first is that taxable sales reported by our local firms have been on the rise every single year for the last decade. And they saw that again in 2021, despite the tailing of the pandemic. So we had a record year for sales tax in 2020 during the heart of the pandemic, and another year in 2021. That might tail off or might plateau a little bit in 2022, but the nice part about that is that is a resource that we can tap into in Hermantown without fear of that ending up in a different direction. What that says is that business is going strong and growing in Hermantown. The second important piece is at least 75%, the number kind of clocks in a little bit higher than that, of our sales tax is paid by non-residents per that most recent study. We're a little bit of a unique community in Minnesota based on our population size, just a shade over 10,000, but that we have several big box retailers that draw in shoppers from other communities to do their shopping here in Hermantown. So when we think about where sales tax comes from, and we think about the impact it has on Hermantown residents, it's important to note that when folks enter with the ability to vote and they see that piece, they know that the amount of money, those price tags for some of those pieces, from trails to the parks to the arena, can be large numbers, but a significant amount of that is going to be paid by non-residents who are passing through and their shopping habits are already taken care of here. Had a handful of folks say, gosh, seems like that's fantastic because other folks are paying for it, or a negative that other folks are paying for it. The reality is it's that it's an is what it is. The fact that we are able to draw in folks in this community who shop here, that habit's not going to change. It's just a matter of if Hermantown wants to be able to utilize that unique sales tax opportunity to be able to make a difference. And part of the reason why that's important, and I'll turn it over to John on a little bit of the history in this, but a lot of other cities in Minnesota have a local government or a local government aid option to fund different things that they're doing in their cities. We don't have that option here at Hermantown, do we?
You're right. And so just for a discussion, is that the city does not receive local government aid. There's about 100 cities in Minnesota that do not. And primarily they are in the metro area. And then there's a number of them in greater Minnesota as well, and Hermantown being one. In large part because of the age of our housing stock. Hermantown is a relatively new city. So a lot of the majority of the housing has been built since 1940. And that's kind of the cutoff is, excuse me, the percentage of housing that was built prior to 1940. And so while Proctor gets in excess of $1 million in local government aid, Virginia gets in excess of $4 million in local government aid, the city of Hermantown does not receive anything and hasn't for, I want to say, 6-7 years, where we have not received any local government aid.
So in absence of that lever to pull to be able to fund different projects, or whether we're talking about the community recreation initiative or anything that does make the opportunity for sales tax one of the other levers that's capable of being pulled. We're seeing it successfully pulled in the community now. Sales tax as an opportunity to fund something, and with the Essential Wellness Center. John, the discussions about that started even before 2014, and that project has proven to be in short order incredibly successful and funded entirely by sales tax.
Yeah, so I mean, we had to go to the legislature to allow for that usage. So we had a 1% sales tax. We went to the legislature to ask, okay, we have this money coming in, can we use it for this purpose? And that was approved by the voters, like by 74%. So that would have been, I believe, in 2018. And so at that point in time, we were able to use sales tax for that purpose. The city can only use sales tax for specifically things approved by both the legislature and by the voters. We can't just use it for anything we want. It has to be approved specifically by the legislature and by the voters for specific purposes.
And there's a lot of, for lack of a better term, like regulation and guidance on what those things can be and how they operate. Obviously, one of the hot button topics right now in our community is the fire department, and sales tax can't be leveraged to support or make changes there.
Right. Sales tax can only be used for sewer trunk lines, water improvements, for the financing of this building, including the police and fire and city hall and the wellness center. Those are the only 4 things that sales tax currently can be used for.
So let's talk about some possibilities that should voters think that they're a good fit, that sales tax can be used for. And we'll pivot to, we'll talk first about the trail system, in part because that's probably the area, Eric, where we get the most positive feedback at City Hall in terms of amenities that have been brought online or improved in recent memory.
Yeah, that's true. Once again, kind of dialing it back to 2016 and that previous 2014 study, the city was able to utilize that approval by the GMRPTC to pursue some grant opportunities. So back in 17 and 18, the city had submitted for a grant from the state, basically using legacy fund dollars to create a portion of this trail system. This is basically what we utilized is calling the Boulder Trail as well as the North King Creek Trail. As part of that, the city was able to obtain $820,000 in grant funds that we used in addition to some of our sales tax in association with the construction of a sanitary sewer trunk line over this Boulder Trail segment here. So that's a picture you see on your screen right here. This is the Boulder Trail segment, which generally goes from Stebner Park down to Hermantown Road. It's approximately 2.5 miles in length. It's a 10-foot wide trail system. It's, for the most part, 100% handicap accessible. It's grades of 5% of less. It's a great asset to our community and heavily used that way. We've had the benefit of working with a couple other of our community groups, i.e. St. Louis County, to obtain another smaller grant to have another trail segment within Fichtner Park, and then St. Louis County Road Improvement Project that did some sidewalks, or basically a super sidewalk along Stebner Road. So right now we've been able to working quite well with the funds that we had available, whether the grants or the sales tax for the sanitary sewer, to create almost 3 miles worth of trail system within this system. Overall, as Joe had mentioned, this is only 30% done. Eventually, we're going to be looking from that school campus and the wellness center all the way down to our Proctor border. What you're seeing right now is this is kind of a rough representation of this trail system, with the lines in blue being future segments associated with the trail, and the lines in red being ones that we've completed to date. The city in the past has been very aggressive at trying to obtain grants for this work, and will continue to do in the future, because we can use any sort of monies that may be obtained through the sales tax as a match for any potential grants that we could receive. However, the grants are extremely competitive. The city, once again, since I've been here, we've pursued at least 6 to 8 different grant opportunities, and really only had 2 of them. So it's very, very competitive. There's not a lot of monies available overall for these type of grant opportunities. Right now, we're seeing trails coming in about $200 a lineal foot. That's up substantially. When we first started this, we were looking at about $100 a lineal foot. So really, grants can only take care of a certain portion or certain percentage of this trail overall system. So that's where the potential use of the sales tax would help the city to be able to realize the completion of this trail system, connect it over to Proctor, and to hand it off to them at that point. I believe that Proctor as well is also looking at some potential funding that they can work on their trail segment and get that down into the Duluth as well. So between the two communities is a great opportunity to really see a lot of this vision come to fruition in a short amount of time period. Once again, by utilizing a grant, not a grant, excuse me, but utilizing sales tax, we can really see this happen within a shorter time frame, 5 to 7 years associated with that. Where if this was strictly done on park dedication and grant funding opportunities, it would be decades in the making, just with the sheer cost of this type of trail work to be done.
Thanks, Eric. And I think that that's really the 2 points that are important about the trail system that, well, and let me start with, so folks who have experienced it, oftentimes are surprised that this isn't the full scope of it. There are 3 wonderful miles available in Hermantown, but there are possibility to connect all kinds of different areas across Hermantown once 10 miles are able to be completed. And the second piece being, hey, you've got some of it done. Why do we have to leverage sales tax to be able to have the rest? And really it's the reality that we're, would you like your trail system completed, so that you can utilize it in the next 5 to 7 years, or we're really talking about a generational project across multi-generations before we get there. The map in front of you again is not super to detail, but it gives you a rough idea on where a lot of things are going. We're going to connect Highway 53 and the growing Highway 53 corridor, the schools, the wellness center, to Fichtner Park, which we're going to talk about shortly, the marketplace, City Hall, Stebner Park, Keene Creek Park. All of our major parks in Hermantown would almost be connected with this plan, and then down through Proctor with their eventual plan to hopefully carry it through to the Munger and beyond. For folks who have not experienced the trail or dialing in for the first time, a 10-foot wide, accessible path, non-motorized, that we keep open 365 days a year. As soon as our roads are clear in the winter, the Public Works team here does an awesome job of keeping that open. And we got a lot of compliments in the first year around about folks being able to get outdoors and off of our busy roads to use the Hermantown Connector Trail system and the Boulder system, or the Boulder Trail. Before we dive into the park, let's pivot to the additional sheet of ice. This piece is a really unique project within the community recreation initiative as a whole, because it drives a great deal of economic impact differently than the other projects do. So when a couple of things that make the additional sheet of ice interesting is that it would have an economic impact of more than $2 million annually expected. Hockey as a whole right now brings roughly $4 to $5 million into our community, and a second sheet of ice then would bump that up to about the $7 million mark. It's been interesting through this process talking about regional impact down in the Twin Cities area, where folks are generally blown away that we've been able to build a statewide, if not national, reputation for hockey success with a single arena, a single indoor arena that is funded only by the school, not by the city. And that current arena doesn't meet the community needs. And when we talk about that, we're really talking about our youngest hockey players and our oldest hockey players being able to get ice time during hours that are work for families and work for working adults. We've had an awesome partnership with the school on a variety of projects. This is a really great example of that. We'll show that in a moment, and that we're working with them to determine what's their best next step on a variety of areas, such as their administration building, on where we could put that arena and how it best works for their needs. Finally, and we've had to dispel a little bit of the myth that hockey gets everything. The only commitment that hockey as a whole right now gets from the city of Hermantown and the work that we do on the city staff side is a $3,000 discount for water on the outdoor rinks, which, Eric, that matches the same discount that we do for soccer on the Stebner parks, for baseball, for our other user groups as well.
Yeah, exactly. It works over at Stebner Park with their irrigation associated with the soccer fields over there. So it's like I said, it's a match between the two different user groups.
And so when we talk about the possibility of the city getting more involved than it has been in before, I'm going to show you 2 or 3 different pictures that have been designed by DSGW, and I'm going to ask Chad Ronchetti to hop in a second and walk through how this relationship fits on this portion of the project and is a little bit different. But I'm going to show you the possible East addition and walk you through a little bit of the arena, and then the possible West addition, in part to show that flexibility that's still on the table with us. But on the screen right now, you can see the gray box representing the current ice arena. And if you've been in there, it's totally functional and definitely can handle some of the things that happen in there on a big scale, but is really limiting in terms of tournaments and other greater opportunities that could be a possibility here in Hermantown. A second sheet of ice would not only open that up, but the viewing area, the locker room, which the current setup deals with some equity issues between the girls and boys teams and some access issues for some of our folks to be able to be a part of hockey. All of that would then be rectified, and we would go away from having what really is a functional, and I don't mean that as a super big compliment, but as a reality, a functional arena to really an experience. Here's the second level where you'd be looking down on the spectator seating, looking down from the open concourse on the new ice arena. And again, as we mentioned, there's still a lot of flexibility in where this can be built. This is the possible West Edition, and that hinges on where the best place the school district would think for the administration building. This picture actually shows up in the left-hand corner the school district offices inside the new arena as an option that the school can consider. So there's a lot of flexibility built into this piece. It allows us to maximize the resources around a single chiller and what the school already has in place for what they've done for years in their arena, but also to bring Hermantown's resources and abilities in this important area, not only in Hermantown, but in Minnesota, up to speed. We are pretty skilled at the city doing trails, as Eric and I smile at each other, and pretty skilled at parks, but we don't build a lot of arenas. But Krause Anderson does that. And so, Chad, this is a different type of partnership in this, because the scale of this is certainly different than the other parts of the project, but it's also a different type of project within Hermantown, and we need a different type of partner experience than we've had on that. And we've had Krause Anderson on board. And if you could talk a little bit about how that relationship came to be in your role in this, that'd be wonderful.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Again, Chad Ronchetti with Krause Anderson Construction. We were through an interview process selected by the City of Hermantown to help advise them through the referendum process, to help educate voters on what the implications are and make sure that help advise on when mailings and other information should come out. Krause Anderson was hired for their expertise and selected based on their expertise. We have built a significant number of arenas across the state, including in partnership with DSGW for the Iron Trail Motors and arena in Virginia, the one in Grand Rapids, one up in Ely. So we ice arenas are what a big portion of what we do, and we are doing that in partnership with DSGW.
Perfect. Thanks, Chad. And when we talk about additional possibilities on the screen here, 10.84 million will get kind of a skeleton of an indoor arena, and the opportunities for philanthropic giving, adding to both this project and other projects that we've discussed today, are part of what take it to the next level. We've been doing work on that, both on the city staff side and in the community side. But obviously, if anyone's interested in connecting and being involved in that, both on the philanthropic side or the community side, can reach out to me at City Hall and be able to reach out and see what next steps or what projects are most interesting to you. Let's dive over to the reimagining of Fichtner Park now. Fichtner Park is, for folks who are unfamiliar with Hermantown, our central kind of park, our baseball fields, and a few other amenities that are there. But it's definitely aging. It has access issues and ADA issues overall, both at the park and in bathrooms. There are challenges for its primary use, baseball and some softball, and outdoor uses in the spring, in that the location of its main field is also the lowest spot now as the park has evolved. So that's a pretty wet spot in the spring. The baseball, basketball, skate park, and playground facilities are all aging. And there's really, and I think Eric mentioned this a little bit, we'll have him talk about it more, but really limited updates that we can do, kind of fixes here and there with how current budgeting works and how current park dedication fees work. And Eric, without sales tax, it's kind of a piece by piece process to be able to make any changes. And it takes some of the more significant changes off the table at Fichtner Park, doesn't it?
It really does, yes. We've been very lucky as a growing community that we do bring in park dedication with new lot development and new commercial development in the city. However, those numbers really range in the tens of thousands, and even that's probably in the low to mid tens of thousands at best. whereas the improvements needed over at Fichtner Park range really in the more to hundred thousands of dollars plus. So the same thing with park dedication, we're able to do small projects where we can bring in a new dugout. We can probably buy a new piece of play equipment associated with it. But for large scale, a wholesale type of redevelopment of a park, particularly what's needed over here, as Joe had mentioned, the grade challenges and drainage challenges associated with the park. I mean, those are things that, cost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to do. So from a park dedication standpoint, I mean, those are just things that you just really cannot achieve, that you have to look for other sources of fundings to be able to make that work.
So Eric, I'll have you walk us through then what is possible, because Fichtner Park has a wide variety of changes that happen, even in what we've kind of called the base model, that if sales tax, if folks feel like that's a good fit and they pass this on November 8th, that there's some significant and far-reaching upgrades, not just one particular area.
Exactly. We've looked at a number of different concepts, working within that existing budget that we, could be proposed associated with this. And what could we achieve with that $3.8 million? And what you see on the screen here is basically the best that we can achieve budget-wise, that we'd be addressing field 1. That's in the lower left-hand corner. That'd be the rotating of that field, raising it up and providing an artificial turf surface, new underdrain surface associated with it. And that would be envisioned that it could be a multi-use type of field. It could be served for varsity baseball. It can also have basically other fencing brought in. From a temporary standpoint, this could be set up for a softball use as well. So right now, this would be a field that could be really extend the season that we have. I mean, right now we're April and May are pretty tough times to get in for a baseball season, but with an artificial turf and underdrain system, it really opens up that window. To the north of that, it'd be the re-envisioning of the prior softball field and Little League field that they have, a bit more of a reorientation associated with that. The big heart of what we're looking at is bringing more accessibility into this park. We had great success up at Rose Road Field with our softball complex there that turned that into a nice accessible park. And that's what we're visioning here at Fichtner as well. The center concourse that you see is a paved surface that way, looking at ADA accessibility, and really trying to create what you try to see more in some of these baseball complexes where you get more of that cloverleaf or diamond type of design. I mean, obviously with this base plan that we talk about with the potential funds from the initiative, we can't really address the two fields on the eastern side of the park. However, they're generally in decent shape and we can utilize those as best we can. Also, as part of this would be looking at a new basketball and skate park. With that, those are two highly used things within this park right now, and to be able to recreate those in a different location that basically serves the needs of the community, but also helps us turn into more of a central park for the city.
As we kind of take a closer look at the pieces that Eric's talking about, upgraded playground equipment in the center there as well, upgrades to bathrooms, upgrades to concession stands. It's kind of all the way around. And then up in the upper left-hand corner, Eric mentioned a new and improved skate park, as that's pretty dated and aging at the Fichtner Park now, as well as the basketball court. And some folks have seen both floating around online and as well as other presentations, the kind of the more advanced version of this. So if there is philanthropic support for this, we kind of then start talking about the old football field, tennis, pickleball courts, expanding some of those pieces too. And what's nice, Eric, is the partners you've worked with have not only designed in something that, if this passes at X level, at the initial initiative level, is a huge impact, but also can be phased up should it be, philanthropically available to do something special right at the start or over time.
That's right, because we have the advantage of that there is more available land associated with this park. As you referenced, Joe, the old football field located to the north of that, it's really an underutilized portion of this park that could see some potential opportunities at a future date, whether through additional funding or phasing of the overall project.
So let's dive into some of the questions that folks have sent in and that we've kind of addressed in other presentations or have come up more recently, to be able to talk about the community recreation initiative as a whole. The first was, again, and we reiterate this at the beginning, whether 1, 2, or 3 of these components pass, The increase is the same, 0.5%. Our sales tax in Hermantown will move to 8.875. What we didn't realize is that there's a little bit of confusion on that. When we talk about it, the increase being the same, we're talking about the percentage, but that isn't the same dollars. So again, to reiterate, the amount that each project receives is set. We only receive the full amount if all three projects are passed. So it's really that length that is going to be different if only one or two of them pass. The percentage will be the same, the amount of money we make. I had a person in today who said, gosh, we could put all 19 million and have a really great trail system. And that would be true if it operated that way. But only the set amount that is outlined in the project is available for the trail system. A little bit about those timeframes. The arena itself, that particular amount of money would be about 11 years in terms of the tax. The trails about 5 years and the park about 4 years. There's also been some idea that the sales tax doesn't sunset. That's different. We're legally required to sunset this one at this time. A little bit of question again, that 75% sales tax paid by non-residents leaving less than a quarter. We still, as the University of Minnesota described it, we still leak sales tax into other communities with our buying power. A lot of our residents still spend in Duluth. So this is a really good way to feel comfortable about the pieces that are coming into our communities. There's a significant amount of our dollars that are helping support Duluth in terms of their sales tax, and there'll be significant dollars coming into our community from other communities to be able to support ours. That's already the case with the Essential Wellness Center and will be continuing to be the case going forward. And then finally, for folks who've been asked, what does a 0.5% sales tax really look like at the individual level? What would this feel like for me if it's in effect? And we've always said the easy math is if you spend $100 on an item eligible for sales tax, that would now be 50 cents more. If we dive a little deeper, for example, if this 0.5% sales tax increase were in play in 2020, so that we can use real numbers, the per resident impact in Hermantown would have been $33.44 for the full year for each individual. And really, this is, again, part of that unique design of our community, 10,000 plus people, which is, that's the real number. It's not bigger or smaller than that, but 4 big box retailers that are the largest drivers of sales tax in our community. So when we talk about Menards and Fleet Farm, Sam's Club and Walmart, it's not every purchase at those places that's eligible, but the ones that are what's driving a big part of our sales tax. So if you're a resident who doesn't spend a lot of money at those places, your $33.44 is likely even smaller than that. And again, the question had come up before about the timeframes on each individual project. Should only the arena pass, the project will be, or the sales tax will be in place for about 11 years and then sunset. If only the trails pass, about 5 years before it sunsets, and the park about 4 years. Together, all three, about 20 years. But to put that into perspective, and I'll throw it to Mr. Mulder, it's the same kind of thought process or funding for the Essential Wellness Center. And thanks to the work of Kevin Warren and our finance department and their conservative budgeting, we're already significantly ahead of where we expected to be in regards to sales tax and the Essential Wellness Center.
Yeah, so I mean, we anticipate that the 0.5% sales tax will generate 1.5 million. But as sales increase and stuff like that, we're confident that that will be more than enough to make that happen. So.
Perfect. I've got a handful of folks online that I'll unmute if there's any questions from there, and some folks in our audience here, so we can open it up for Q&A. If there's any further questions or comments that have come in, again, some of the new pieces that we've reiterated is that it doesn't have to be that it's not 19 million per project; it's specific amounts. The other question that has come up, now it's coming in, is if I want to only stagger my votes and I want to vote for, say, 1 or 2 projects this year and then another one down the road, is that going to be an option? And John, I'll answer it, and then I'll let you chime in. That we've seen in short order some significant changes to how sales tax operates and how communities like us can leverage that, just from the Essential Wellness Center to now. And so when I've been asked that question about that, I would say it's probably best to treat the 3 questions on the ballot right now as the only opportunity these might come in. There may be others, but there's a degree of uncertainty and unpredictability right now with how the legislature is treating sales tax as a lever that communities like us can utilize.
Right, so the city has permission to ask at this point in time for that. If any one of these fails, we would have to go back to the legislature and ask permission again, and then be able to do that referendum. And the legislature is not likely to approve a request that has already been denied. So if it fails, the option of, well, we'll just ask later and maybe I'll vote yes later is probably not going to happen. This is kind of the chance for you to vote, if that's how you feel inclined to do so, to vote for these projects. Is now it's the time to do that. Don't wait at a later date. Think, well, maybe we can ask that question later after we see how these other ones go. No, you need to vote. If you're so inclined, you need to vote for those now.
And the other question is, if I haven't, or I have a group of folks, or I have members of the community that are interested in learning about this more and haven't necessarily seen any of the Facebook posts or any of the social media or any of the pieces, we've just maybe gotten the flyer that the city put together in our mailbox. How can we learn more about it? And there's really two ways. One, anyone can reach out to me at City Hall at any time. This is kind of the unsurprisingly number one thing that we're talking about on a regular basis here at City Hall these days, but also the ability to have presentations like this where I come out and talk to you or groups and answer questions one-on-one is also open. So we've done a few of those at the school already. I'll be working with a group at the History Center tomorrow night and also at Edgewood Vista. So if there is a group of folks who are passionate, almost of any size, I'd be happy to come out and walk them through what other folks have said about this, what's important, and give them the information. Not advocacy, certainly letting folks make up their own mind, but being able to have the clarity needed. Because if the last thing we'd want is someone to walk in and have the opportunity to decide on these three questions and not have a full scope of the ramifications, the information, and the possibilities of these projects. It's been an arduous and long process in a good way to get to this point. And the questions themselves can be a little unwieldy on the ballot, but at least that way we know that we've done everything we can to get in front of folks. Unless the four of you think there's anything I have covered, haven't covered, or if there's any questions from the audience, I think that we're in good shape. Anything, gentlemen? Oh, well, again,
Do you have any questions?
and we want to thank the folks both in chambers and online for joining us here tonight. We will have one more of these public information meetings on November 2nd, and then any other changes or any places that I'm scheduled to be will be updated on our website, hermantownmn.com/vote. Thanks again for joining us tonight.